they'll say, "Oh, we don't recruit internationally because it's too expensive to." And we say, "No, it's too expensive not to." Meaning that this enrollment cliff, all these things that we see that are happening with domestic enrollments, like the only line that's going straight up and to the right are international enrollments.
And if you're recruiting from one area and you're not seeing the results you like, and you look at our charts and you see that it scores relatively low, it might be time to rethink your strategy.
Welcome to EdUp International, episode 6. I'm your host, James Schaefer. I'm with Terrell University in Times Square, New York City. You heard some great insights from Jay and from Ted. They're with Enrollment Charts at enrollmentcharts.com. Fantastic insights from the Moneyball of international student recruitment and marketing. Here we go. We have Ted Conway with us, and we also have Jay Ligon. Jay is the Director of International Affairs at Louisiana Tech University, and he is also the founder and product developer at Enrollment Charts. Jay, could you tell us a little bit about biking in Central America?
Yeah, I don't usually start off my introductions that way, but sure, I can do that. Yeah. No, I used to teach ESL in Houston for ELS, and after doing that for a few years, after graduating, decided I needed to get out, and have some adventure. And so, a buddy of mine, Lee Walker, and I, we rode our bicycles across Central America, and we had this gigantic map in our living room. Well, actually, Ted in my living room. We were roommates back in the day, and had this gigantic map pinned to the wall, and we circled every desirable swimming hole and just figured out how far we'd have to ride our bike from A to B in order to get to the next swimming hole, and that's how we did it. And yeah, rode our little butts off. It was pretty exhausting. And at the same time, I really liked it and ended up staying in Nicaragua for 6 months after that at this volcanic crater lake, and worked out a gig where I helped with a hostel for free room and board, and did that for a bit. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. I know Belize is amazing. And actually, most of the tourists are on those two islands all the time in Belize, but I guess you biked in the mainland mostly.
Well, being from Houston, Belize is incredibly hilly. So like Lee and I got there, like we were so used to long distance rides, and then we get to Belize, and it's just these soft rolling hills, and I remember just, oh my God, this is so hard, and I had no idea what Guatemala had in store for us. It's like literally the minute you cross the border, it's like unpaved roads that go straight up. And yeah, Belize is gorgeous. I mean, like the whole area was just unbelievable. Um, and yeah, the funnest debate that we had during the entire ride was we kept asking people which continent Central America belonged to, and it was amazing the uncertainty that we got in people's answers. It's like,
Oh,
oh no,
well.
it's not North America. No, it's not South America. It's like, yeah. So
Yeah.
it was a
All
lot of
right.
fun. It was a great
Have,
time. Yeah.
have you thought about writing a book?
Yeah, but probably not about that. I'd probably write a book about the greatest roommate of all time named Ted Conway.
Oh, okay. Okay. So here's Ted Conway. So he's the operations director at Enrollment Charts, has an MFA in screenwriting, is a trained chef, and before we came on the air was telling me about how awesome Asian food is for cooking vegan.
Yeah, yeah. I guess my mom raised our family mostly vegetarian, so even though I enjoyed meat quite a bit, we didn't eat a lot of it around the house, and um, various reasons I moved into eating that way and cooking that way. Not to get into that, but I guess I have a pacemaker, a congenital heart condition, and it's just eating that way has made my life a lot easier in a number of ways. And I've also always loved to write and love film, and getting a degree in screenwriting and being a writer was a lifelong goal of mine. And I went to a really small school in Virginia and got to work with some really amazing writers over there in a kind of a non-traditional program, Hollins University. And after that, got into ESL, and eventually that led me here. But yeah, Jay and I go way back. We were roommates. several times, and I think both of our paths led us into working with international students, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, and his buddy who he rode bikes with, he and I used to play music together all the time, and so we've got lots of old stories that we might keep off this podcast, but a lot of good times. And but yeah, it's brought us here working together, and I think that's pretty cool.
All right. No, that sounds awesome. Maybe Jay, you can tell us a little bit about why you started thinking about founding Enrollment Charts and how it got started.
Yeah, man. Well, for one, I just got to say, Ted and I have notorious house parties. So, James, if you ever, want to come hang out with us, we'll find a good place to throw down. But no. So yeah, COVID, man. COVID. I saw a lot of amazing people in the field who aren't there anymore. And it wasn't because, they passed away or anything like that. It was that their institution was dealing with an unreasonable amount of uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, anyone who came to the table that didn't look like they had an answer that they could confirm was suddenly like, well, maybe this is not something we can rely upon. And so I just saw great talent, just kind of get let go. And so it was at that point around the same time during COVID. I started. I think all of us picked up interesting hobbies during that period of time, and I started really saying, okay, well, I want to learn how to look at data, how to visualize data, and I started realizing, wow, like if I would have known any of this then, maybe I could have shared it with some of the people who are really concerned and who I know were ultimately let go. And that's really what I think got us to a point where we said it's important for us to figure out how to explain what many of us feel in our gut about, oh, well, this market's going to work out, or, oh, I feel like we're going to get enrollments from here, even though we might not be seeing them yet. It was really, that was the tipping point.
Interesting. What's interesting about it is it's like having something so horrible happening, and then, suddenly you see everything in a new light and sort of a new opportunity. I think what's most poignant there is talking about, very high quality staff or high quality professionals who are getting let go just because of that dip of what's happening at the universities for a couple of years, and perhaps the university leaders not thinking about the long term there.
Yeah. There were conversations that I had with numerous people where they were saying, this is a trend and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, it's not. It's a blip, and we will move past this. And luckily, I have a strong enough voice, and I was able to say it with enough conviction that people ended up listening to me, and I'm really glad they did. But I think now when I go out on the road, I don't know if you recruit yourself, James, but like when I'm on the road, I see a lot of new faces, a lot of noobs that are out there that great that they got the opportunity to do it, and I hope they stick with it, and I hope they have great careers. But there's a lot of I don't want to say naivety, but there's not as much knowledge that they're standing on as the people that came before them. And, to me, that means that they're as vulnerable, if not more so. And so I just feel like we all need to just get around some hard data, be able to look at it in a systematic way, and be able to tell our employers, this is exactly why we're doing this.
Yeah, because they're vulnerable, that they're not going to have the conviction to, give the advice to stay the course. So I guess at Enrollment Charts, what you're offering is, here's the data that really gives you the background in your reporting so that you can stay the course if that's the way you want to go, or you can make the decision that let's do something different than everybody else because we're seeing the data in a different way than everybody else.
Yeah, you could take that contrarian approach. It's definitely an interesting one. China's clearly below its pre-COVID highs, which I discussed in the call that when we met. And yet, at the same time, there's got to be a couple of us. I know I'm one that's scratching their head going, could it be time? Like, is it time to get in? Like, no one else is talking about it. Maybe that's a good thing, So yeah, I do think there's something about saturation, looking for that saturation. The thing that I hope Enrollment Charts does, and is looking at kind of under the hood stuff like the advanced decline line or percent above certain moving averages, so that we can see, hey, this is looking weak here. We might want to say, instead of going twice a year, let's just go once a year until we know a little bit more, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't take long for us to say, yeah, we're going to stay in this and come back in the spring. That's great. But setting aside the amount of money it takes to go on a couple, a few country tour. I mean, yeah, it's good money you can set aside and say, well, I'll wait till I have a little better information going on.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess Ted, you're operations director, and I guess you're the brains behind the tech part of the data. And so, how did you get started at Enrollment Charts?
Yeah. So if you reach out, I'm most likely going to be the one responding and keeping in touch with you all. I'm the one sending the emails and doing all the behind the scenes work like that. But yeah, Jay called me. I guess it was sometime last year, and was had been kicking around this idea for a while. We've talked about uh, working with data for a while here, and Jay called me one day and was just like, said, I think I got it. I think this is something we need to look into. And the more I looked into it, it was something I really wanted to be a part of. Um, anyone who's worked in a university or, in that setting, who is in charge of recruitment or having to show numbers, knows how difficult it can be. I mean, some of it is throwing darts at the wall and hoping one of them sticks. And there's got to be a better way than that. And we've, we've perfected that to a degree. And I'll let Jay talk on that more. But yeah, that's what I do here. So I'm the one. I'm the one to get in touch with if you want to speak to us.
All right, right. And I know one of the first things you put out was a great blog about India. So anybody here can just pause right now and go to enrollmentcharts.com and click blog, and you'll get the India blog. But tell us a little bit about some of the insights in that India blog there, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back, like I said, to kind of that same uncertainty with pre-COVID, where people are overreacting to oh my God, what's happening here? And I was like, well, this is not rocket science. You've got India, which did phenomenal rebounding out of COVID, surprisingly so. I mean, like, the numbers are astronomical, and it just went straight up, a parabolic move, and then it did what a lot of things would do when they get overextended, and it came back down. And we're still 100% above where we were in our pre-COVID highs. I mean, 100%. And yet people are acting like it's about to crash. Like it's 1929 and the Great Depression's right around the corner or something. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. And I'm not saying it can't happen, but you're suggesting a pretty significant fall to continue. And I just like, what I see is, I see an opportunity to allow some people to get scared, to some people make the same kind of mistakes they made during COVID, where they're like, oh, it's uncertain. What do we do? What do we do? And they end up chewing on it for so long that I've already been there twice, and gotten the enrollments out of it, So, I mean, I felt like that was something that needed to get talked about. One thing that Ted helps me a lot with is that my brain works with these numbers, and I visualize them in certain ways, maybe intuitively, just from doing it for as long as I have. But I like to see if it resonates with that. And like when we talked about this, like the idea of a rubber band, like it worked to where people could understand kind of what I'm talking about. And it's like, if you take a rubber band, James, and you just pull it, the resistance just gets tighter and tighter, and you just keep pulling out, and the minute you let go, it's just going to slam right back, right? And that's why, a lot of times it feels like you're taking the elevator in one direction, with the escalator in one direction, the elevator in the other, right? It's like you're slowly like moving, and then it's just like bam, it just slams right down. And this is what you might call mean reversion. This is that bell curve we learned back in school, where you got that line in the middle, right? And something gets too many standard deviations away in any direction, it's likely to have that same thing with the rubber band and just slam right back. And what the thing is, like when it does do that, it's actually valuable information in what it does. So, for instance, when it slams back and you remain 100% above pre-COVID highs, that's pretty great. That lets you know, like, wow, this could rebound and move on to higher numbers. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just kind of travels sideways for a little bit, or maybe it does slam back down. But whatever it does will let you know without a doubt either we are in a trend or we're in a straight up mean reversion period where it's just going to slam down and slam down really hard.
Yeah, yeah, and you also brought up the concept of higher highs, higher lows, and sort
Oh
of
yeah,
the
yeah,
and the investing concept of buying the dip
yeah, yeah.
while others are panicking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's again kind of the thing of working with someone like Ted is that like I can trust him to say, I don't get it. Like, you gotta show me this in a different way. And so us, looking at it over and over and say, okay, maybe there's some instructional pieces that have to be included with this, like that illustration you just referenced, saying, here's your low, here's your higher low, here's your high, here's your higher high. You need pieces like that to kind of understand. There's a whole dialogue vocabulary that's involved.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, Jay, because I was gonna bring up the rubber band theory as something that listeners should look into. We've got a little bit about it on our blog, and then in the video that we just posted of the recording of our first call, where some great charts where you can kind of see that, put some visuals to what you're hearing. But yeah, if anyone's listening to this and saying that doesn't quite make sense, I really highly recommend checking out that blog and then checking out the charts to kind of make that connection, because that really helped me quite a bit. Some of this sounds complex, when people hear the word data, some people want to run, but if it can be visualized and it looks like, when you can really start to make sense of it, it's the patterns that you can make out of it is just really cool. And Jay's ability to come up with analogies, I think, is really one of his strong suits. And you know, I just think it really boosts what we're doing here. So.
Yeah, and again, when you think of something like that, like the rubber band theory, it holds true here. You think about hearing from consulate officials that, when I was a junior consulate official, there were always these weekly meetings going on, and if I had just given a lot of visas that week, I heard about it, so that next week I scaled back. But it didn't have anything to do with, here's the individual case, and I'm going to give this. They get the pressure of if they started giving too many visas, let's scale it back a little bit. So that's almost the rubber band thing, that there's all these natural things going on in human interaction, also about that pulls back the rubber band.
I'm sorry, James. You set it up for me. I'm going to have to go for the dunk here.
Mm-hmm.
It that works in different time frames as well. So, like you might say, week to week in those meetings, right? But then those week to weeks, there might be like, oh well, no, now we need to pull back. Oh, now we need to issue more. No, now. But the thing is within those little bitty week to weeks, if you zoom out and look at it in a longer time frame, you'll see, wow, that is an uptrend. Even when they would pull back, they wouldn't pull back as much. Or that's a downtrend, or that's just noise, right? It's just, it's not really affecting the big move. And whether that's done with like the moving averages that we talked about, where it's like, hey, I'm going to figure out an average, just, take the number of periods, like whether that's annually or monthly, like the data that we actually look at with our clients. Like we're actually going to take the number of periods and then divide it by that number. So if you have like 5 periods, you add them all up, divide by 5, just like we used to figure out our GPA back in the day, right? Like you also want to also do this and figure out, like, okay, this is my average, and then I can draw that so that 5 periods, 5 periods, 5 periods, 5 periods, or 5 periods, 5, and you have a moving average, and then okay, this is the direction of a longer term trend than say that weekly meeting. And that's why what we do with the clients, I think, is so interesting, because what we did on that call was data that in my mind is really 2 years old. Even though it's 23, 24, And God bless open doors. I mean, I don't mean that in any bad way, but the thing is that you're not going to really put it to work until probably the fall of, next year when you start recruiting. So you're really recruiting for 25, 26. But honestly, you're really recruiting for years after that because you're expecting, oh, well, this is, like maybe the student's a junior right now. I mean, so there's a real lag in that, which is why having up to date data is so important. And so what we do with the enrollment charts is we have a monthly call where we look at these are the way visa issuance looks like for this month. And we run through all the same sort of charts, run through the enrollment chart scores and all that, but we're letting people know in real time. So when I was in India, uh, I was recruiting and someone was asking me, "Hey, what do you think about this upcoming quarter?" Well, I knew exactly or semester. I'm in a quarter system, but like, what do you think about this upcoming semester? I knew exactly what to tell them. I was like, "Oh, I think we're going to do like this," and the reason why is because the data I'm looking at is 2 months old, and the data you're looking at is more than a full calendar year.
Yeah, yeah. And then in India right now is the one that everybody was talking about after doing so well, especially with like fall 2023. And
Mm,
then after that, you get all the anecdotal reports. Oh my God, all these people are not getting the visa that I thought might get the visa.
right.
And then there comes the panic, even
Hmm.
though that's probably just, I guess you call it the higher low, the short term trend just coming back to the mean a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, do you have anything specific to say about India as far as
I
that?
have, yeah, become a client and we'll tell you all about
Yeah, okay.
it. I mean, we have eyes on this and we have a pretty strong sense of what's going on. And so, yeah, I mean, we want to see enrollment charts be able to survive. It's a new thing. It's, and if we don't get clients within this year, it might be a 1 year little project, and then we go back to our regular lives. But we get some clients, we'll keep doing it, and we'll be informing those people of very immediate data that they can use.
All right. Ted, could you talk a little bit about your ESL background and how that translates into your work at enrollment charts?
Yeah, like I said, I got started teaching in adult education and eventually found myself working in admin at a small community college down here. And part of my job was to build the program there, getting students discounted tuition in some of the college programs as well. And uh, you know, I wish I had resources like this to help because it really I went in and I realized that I was the only one in the office that tasked with that responsibility, and that was partly because no one else in the office wanted the responsibility or knew what they were doing with that. And so when I started talking to Jay about this, I mean, it took me back to that time when I was really trying. I was doing everything that I knew how to do and using all the resources I had. But it would have been really helpful to have some sort of data that, or like we have charts to pull from and kind of narrow down my thinking rather than, okay, I'm going to try this month. If I don't see results, next quarter I'm going to try something else. And real quick, I'd like to, and Jay, you can expand on this if you want to, but something I think that's really cool uh, that you can see in the video we recorded. I think Jay, you brought it up a few minutes ago, but the enrollment chart scores or EC scores, and these are just charts that you can look at and you know kind of evaluate a region or a country as far as the success you might have recruiting from that area. And if you're recruiting from one area and you're not seeing the results you like, and you look at our charts and you see that it scores relatively low, it might be time to rethink your strategy. And just having a quick visual like that, I think, is really cool. We're all educators, and we all know the saying, "You meet the students where they are." And I think this is a really cool resource for no matter where you are and as far as your recruiting game goes, whether you're really experienced or just jumping into it like many of us educators end up doing. uh, it's a place to where you can, kind of see where you are and go from there. And then, and so I don't know if you want to take over on that, Jay, or if you wanted to move on, but I just wanted to
Well,
throw
well,
that in there.
quick
So,
follow up on the
uh,
English part first before we go to
yeah,
Jay is since I recruited for a proprietary ESL school, and I remember back in the day you'd sit with the owner, and it was all based on your gut. I mean, going
yeah,
to Turkey, Korea, Brazil, great ideas. Going to Czech Republic, maybe not, but we went to Czech Republic. All that based on no data. Just, I mean, obviously we knew Turkey, Brazil, Korea were sending us a lot of students, but we didn't have recent trends. We were just basically going on our gut instinct.
yeah. I think I remember several conversations, I mean, I loved working with everyone I worked with there, but coming up with an idea of how we could get more students into the program, and the answer being, well, do you have the time to do that? Is that something that we should try? Just nobody really knew whether it was a good idea or not. And no matter who I spoke to, I didn't get, much more input. And so I think I hope that we can fill some of that need. So,
I think a lot of it comes down to Ted got put in this position, told go with no training. Like
yeah,
no one knowledgeably stepping in and saying, and here's how you do this. But then what happens as a result is you have people like that who are then told and now present your ideas to the CEO or the president or whatever, you're the dean, whoever that might be, and suddenly you walk into the room thinking, I really hope I don't blow this, and they're looking at you like, well, you're the smartest person here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's just an unnecessary God, that's just terrible. It's like just a terrible strategy.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
nothing against Ted. I mean, I'm sure Ted did a great job, but I mean, it's like I was thinking about it. When we created these the EC scores or enrollment chart scores, right? I was thinking about it because I remember day one, and James, you probably do as well. Like when you were looking at, okay, so which country do we go to, right? And you go, well, there's a whole lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you choose? What do you do to make sure that you pick the right one? And I remember we got like three students from Madagascar all at once, and like I was like, oh my gosh, the percentage increase is huge. We've got to go to Madagascar, right? And James is trying desperately to hold back a laugh. I can see his face curling
Yeah.
up, because he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like that is not a strategy. That's reacting to things that happen. And sometimes we find lightning in a bottle, but other times we really just desperately fall flat on our butts, and just don't know what to do about it. And so, yeah, so I think that these scores, the interesting thing is like, if you look at like, any sort of a data set, what you see is the absolute score, right? You see like an absolute strength. That's a better way to put it. So like India is clearly the leader in the world right now, if you look at it from an absolute value. But the minute you put it into a mathematical algorithm and you have all of these countries being compared individually, but then compared to one another, you get absolute and relative strength. And so that's one of the things where the EC scores are going to give you something that you're never going to find by looking at a spreadsheet unless you have the exact formula that we're running. And we're looking at different ways. We're looking, I talk a lot about breadth in the call that's up on our YouTube channel. Thanks, props Ted for posting that there, and we're going to have some clips that are looking pretty good. So I think we're planning on coming out, with a whole lot of stuff. But there's breadth. You've got to talk about momentum. Things that are moving faster than others or rate of change. You've got to talk about things that are looking at volume. You've got to talk about relative volume, like how are we doing this year versus how we've done for the last several years. There's so many different things, percentage above these moving averages or below them. I mean, there's several different formulas that we run all at once. You kind of push the, metaphorical button and go, and then, you get these scores and you're like, I know where to go. And I mean, it's just
Right.
imagine, James, like, when you were doing this for your proprietary ESL program, if like there was one of the, nerds in the back who probably didn't come out that often go, do, here are the answers. We should go here.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, this is Moneyball. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you're
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
Moneyball
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Great
international
reference.
student
Yeah. Yeah.
recruitment.
Great reference.
And you have to be careful because, of course, India may be your first baseman all-star Giambi, but maybe you're better off, recreating him in the aggregate with three different countries. But I see. I mean, I went to your call last week, and you're basically doing this like Peter Brand in Moneyball. You're trying to get past all the biases and look at the data and see if you can. What was the guy's name? Chad Bradford, the under sidearm relief pitcher that nobody
Yeah.
wanted because he throws
Yeah. He's got
funny,
the funny throw, right?
right?
Yeah.
But the data shows that he's one of the most effective, you know, relief pitchers in baseball.
Yeah.
So it
That's
was
a
a
great
great return
analogy.
on investment. So you're the
Yeah.
Moneyball of international student recruitment.
I'll take that. I'll take
Yes.
that.
Thanks.
There you go.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. And getting right into, I mean, I really liked, could you tell us a little bit about, say, the advanced decline line? That was a
Yeah.
chart that
Yeah.
I saw.
Yeah. That's one that gets a lot of weird looks because nobody understands what it's really measuring. But it is pretty simple. Like, I want to know that more countries are increasing the number of students they're sending versus the number of countries that are decreasing. So let's say you've got, a continent, say South America, right? And you've got like half of the countries are sending more and the other half are sending less, right, than they did the previous year. Well, you would have an advanced decline score of 0, right? Because you would basically be subtracting the decliners from the advancers. And then at that point, you're like, well, it's a mute game, right? There's no advantage here, right? So I'm not going to go recruit there, right? Whereas we see total students, and you might say, yeah, but Brazil was one of the ones that went up, and well, they send a lot of students, and so the totals from South America increased, right? But when you look at it, you're like, yeah, but it increased because of one country,
Mm.
right? So you're going to send all of your energy, all of your money, everything you've got at an entire continent, or maybe you just pick the northern part of South America. Well, good for you. You've kind of gotten close to where it's actually coming from. But the idea is that when you start looking at it as an advanced decline line, you get to a point where you can see it as not just what that absolute value is, but how many people are participating. And in the call, we talk about analogies. The analogy I use is the battalion, the military, right? You have a group of soldiers and they have to cross an enemy line. And if you get it, but when you cross that line, there's only one person left standing, they're not going to hold it, right? It's game over. Anyone that's played Risk knows this, right?
Mhm.
But like if you get over there and you still have the majority of your people with you, well, you're going to hold your line, right? You're going to hold where you are. So that is breadth. That means that how many countries are participating in whatever trend we're experiencing in the absolute data. So, for instance, I was in a meeting yesterday, and I like knowing that I'm the smartest person at the table. I mean, I think we all need to feel that way. And so, when I was in this meeting, Associate Dean was asking, hey, do we need to be worried about the Trump presidency? Like our visa is going to go down as a result of this. And I had to explain to him, I was like, you got to look at the data because what you're talking about is maybe a little bit of bias, right? But you've got to also realize that there were more students in the United States in Trump's first presidency than there were with Obama. The thing is that the momentum waned. So it
Mhm.
wasn't moving up as fast as it was, which is why the chart kind of does like this, right? Notice these are still higher highs, right? It's just that they're not moving as fast. And guess what? The best indicator of was for that was the advanced decline line. Or even better, I'd argue, was the percentage of countries above their 5-year moving average. Because we did that chart also in the call, and you see it clear as day. Like 2017, like you just start seeing that decline. And so what I was telling the associate dean, I was like, it wasn't that we saw a reduction in the number of students. what we saw is a reduction in the number of countries participating. We saw fewer countries benefiting with this. And so maybe the Trump administration selected a few key countries that they were really going to work with. He's a very strategic person. He's thinking about, whatever he wants. And so I'm sure that he was probably saying, well, if I do this, this would be better for what I want versus that. So don't give them any and give these guys a bunch, right? And that's why if you look at breadth in 2017, 2018, there was a top forming, even though it didn't look like it when you looked at the numbers. Oh, another all-time high,
Yeah. And some of your other charts are like with the 5-year moving average, 3-year gains, things like that. So you're looking at things in the long term and not just seeing short term and making a decision on short term things.
Yeah. And also looking at statistically. I think that's the big thing, James, is like I don't want to look at data, or even worse, I don't want to walk into a room and be like, we're going to country Y because I said so. It's like, that was my best, cowboy impersonation, it's like shooting from the hips, I mean, that doesn't work, and it's a really, really bad way to make really expensive decisions. I did a podcast with my buddy Nate Myers, who I mentioned earlier, and we have this thing that we say a lot of times. People will go to universities that don't recruit internationally, and they'll say, "Oh, we don't recruit internationally because it's too expensive to." And we say, "No, it's too expensive not to." Meaning that this enrollment cliff, all these things that we see that are happening with domestic enrollments, like the only line that's going straight up and to the right are international enrollments. And so, you need to differentiate yourself, make sure that you've got that coming in. But during the podcast, it was with Education USA with Adina. We started realizing it's not that it's too expensive not to; it's that it's too expensive to do it incorrectly. And so, if you start talking about the amount of money it takes for our institutions to send us to this country or that country for any extended period of time, with airfare, hotels, keeping us fed, all of these things. If you're walking into a room 6 months ahead of that trip saying, we got to go here, you're not helping. You're just not helping.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, there are certain schools where sort of the avatar of the typical student for them means that maybe they can go a little more low cost with the recruiting and do most of it digitally. Mm-hmm. If you're that type of school, that's not the big name school, but the student is savvy and really looking for a good return on investment, they might find you digitally. So you got to be out there digitally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and then going into regional scores and country scores, that was very impressive because that's your own formula again, where I think you were rating them on a score of 1 to 10.
10 being the best. Yeah, I think actually 9 is the highest score. It's basically in a decile system. So we have a number of things, like I said, number of formulas that we put into a spreadsheet, hit go, and it basically churns out, these, here they are, and they're being looked by absolute and relative strength. And then we have a score where 9 would be the top decile.
Right. Yeah. And that can be powerful. I mean, so if you're working with someone also, you can help somebody in a pinch if they've got a VP who's a little skeptical about, making that trip to country A, and suddenly you can say, but look at the visa numbers last year, how they popped up, or look at this. I mean, so that is helpful because the VPs and the deans and the provosts, they want to see that. They want to see something behind that.
And ideally, someone that's a client for us would invite them into the call. So it's not just one person from the university, right? So that they can do that, or they would take the deck that we share with them of the charts, and then they would try to explain it. But they can be hard to explain this kind of stuff if you don't kind of, if you didn't figure it out, in the long run. I mean, yeah, I can't imagine someone who doesn't fully understand what any of the advanced decline line or things are going into a meeting and being like, well, let me explain to you this chart I saw. And probably wouldn't be good for us, Ted. We probably need to have a disclaimer. You're not allowed to talk about these charts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that said, having, more knowledge, is going to boost your confidence. I mean, if you go in, not to say that, you know, recruiters don't know what they're talking about. That's not my point at all. But like having more knowledge, going, James, talking about our experience working with ESL programs and being maybe thrown into a position, it's, I mean, it's impossible to go in there fully confident if you don't really know the story behind what you're, what you're trying to do. We always talk about in teaching, backwards planning, and here's where we want to be. What do we need to do to get there? And being able to go into a meeting with your VP or your boss and explain this is why I don't think what we were doing last year worked, and then we need to try something different. And if this doesn't work, maybe we need to look at what we're offering at our university and where we're recruiting from. And there's just so much knowledge that can help with that confidence that I think we can help with some of that. And that's what we're here to do. So
Yeah. And again, like you say, sort of the backwards teacher plans that you had. I think Jay was telling us about getting the text just before about country X, where somebody who's on the call is now flying to country X, and perhaps based on what they saw last week, maybe that's not the right country they should be flying to. So strong data like this can help you also cross off some countries from your list.
Well, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
You talk about, it's all about adding value, right? Every one of us that are hired, that work for some organization, our biggest goal is to add value, right? And that's why they have like the first 100 days of your job, right? Your first 100 days in any job you have is that you break even. Like you're not causing the company to lose money on you anymore, right? You should break even in 100 days. I've added enough. Well, the only ways you can add value is by, cutting costs or increasing revenue. And you cut costs by saying we're not going to every one of these countries, and you add revenue by saying we're going to the right countries and bringing the students with us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I will say, I think what Ted was talking about, and James, kind of what you were talking about earlier as well, has something in the back of my head, and that's Ted and I are starting out with these charts and these calls, and we feel like it's a good, simple process for people who want to be more knowledgeable to join. But the slogan, or actually the commander's intent, I guess is maybe a better way of looking at it, of what we do is, enrollment charts is where you go to internationalize. And so what that means is we've already started looking at other things, whether that's a university contacts us directly and says, these are our programs. We're located here. We need, 4 recruitment markets, and we need to know why. So like we're looking at doing things that are more customized like that. We're looking at things where, let's say you have someone who comes in, has a team that they determine these guys don't really know how to recruit. Like we're looking at what does recruitment training look like? Like what are the great points in sales training that we can bring over into public or higher education and say, hey, these are things that you want these recruiters to know. There's so many options where we feel like there are ways that we could help institutions, approach things by leaning into some real knowledge and saying, hey, how do I do this? Louisiana Tech, that's who I work for. Our international undergraduates increased 331% this fall.
Mm-hmm.
That's last time I checked, that's pretty impressive.
Especially for fall 2024.
Yeah.
A lot of people were
flat. We did something based on everything that I'm laying out, right? Having a strategy, having, well-trained recruiters, thinking of what aligns with that university's programs, and this is the kind of stuff that we feel like, what, I bet other universities need this as well. And for me, it's fun. It's, I get to nerd out, which I like to do. I get to hang out with my buddy Ted and meet a few new friends along the way, like yourself, James. We got a good gig, so kind of happy about it.
All right. So I think that puts it in a nutshell. This is the Moneyball view of international student recruitment and marketing. come to the right place. But it really is, instead of just here's a bunch of raw data from Open Doors, here's the Moneyball look at all this data. We're really crunching into the numbers more and giving you some real takeaways for this. And if you're thinking, yes, I need to start looking at 3, 4, 5 other countries, this really helps you get a nice look at that. So you're not wasting your flights and your hotel rooms to a country perhaps you shouldn't go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By all means, James, anyone that's listening is able to find us on enrollmentcharts.com. They can email us at info@enrollmentcharts. But also we're on Twitter and we're on YouTube. And I think both Ted and I hang out an obscene amount on Facebook, which is probably silly, but it shows our age.
Yeah.
And we just set up Blue Sky as well. But so there's nothing on there yet, but you can find us out there. So.
All right. And I forgot to ask Ted, what's the best Asian food for vegan? Would that be Thai?
I guess, I think my favorite, lemongrass tofu is delicious. I'm a sucker for some pad see ew, so I do like some Thai food. But yeah, so and Jay's wife makes killer Korean food, so I need to meet up with her and try to do some of those recipes vegetarian sometime.
Is it vegetarian bibimbap?
Yeah, that'd be delicious.
Not a stretch.
Yes. All right. So Ted, do you have any final things to say?
No, just check us out. Even if you just are curious, reach us at info@enrollmentcharts.com. Shoot us an email. Reach out to us. You can find us on YouTube or just go to our site and check out our blog and watch the video. And we're excited to talk to you and see how we can help. We want to help increase your enrollment and lower those costs. So that's what we're here to do.
All right. And Jay, anything to say?
Just because you mentioned costs, I've got to say this. Any university that works with an agent, they're probably paying out like $3,000 per agent commission, something around there. That's what an annual subscription is at the this basic level for us. Is $3,000, and so that means for the cost of one student, we give you all the data you need so you can figure out where to set up your agent contracts, where to where to actually go to recruit, where not to. I mean, ask me a hard one, man.
All right. Ask you a hard one of where not to recruit.
No, I'm saying it couldn't be simpler. It couldn't make more sense in my mind.
Yeah, it's basically based on the data. Got it. All right.
Hopefully cut some of those uncomfortable meetings in half as far as time goes.
Yes. Sounds good. All right. This has been excellent. So we've got the Moneyball of international student recruitment and marketing. So Ted Conway, thanks for joining us. And Jay Lee Gong, thanks for joining us. This has been the EdUp International podcast. Please like and share us. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please reach out to me. You can see the URL behind my head, or it's podpage.com/EdUp-international. Thanks again. This is EdUp International.